Honey, are you reading emails again?
A Nigerian prince wants to marry me, and all he wants is my SIN number?
No.
Oh my god,
No.
From the moment we learned to navigate the deep and alluring crevices of the internet, our parents warned us to be incredulous of the vast amount of information attainable right at our fingertips. They warned us not to believe everything you see on the internet. That being said, the lesson we were supposed to be learning was to be skeptics and find solid evidence before we solidify our beliefs. So why is it that we tend to believe these inane conspiracies and blatant lies that we see in our everyday lives? If we take a look back in history, our species has always been quite gullible. Since the Paleolithic age, our species lied to one another for simple gain of power. Early Neanderthals stuffed their garments with leaves or grass to accentuate their reproductive organs to help attract female mates. This sly trick allowed for the more intelligent to reproduce first, giving the honest less of a chance. I guess that's just natural selection for you.
Atuk alunda lana. Lana alunda atuk.
Donda. Donda. Ooh. Ooh.
So, as we know, even in our early primitive state, humans used lies and tricks to manipulate the opinions of others. Fast forward a couple thousand years to the creation of makeup, which, less widely known, was in fact initially created by male slaves in ancient Egypt. These clever slaves started to cross-dress, use berries for lipstick, accentuate their cheekbones, make wigs, and even fabricated false breasts in order to get out of the laborious tasks of a slave.
You call that motivating me? Don't just whip with your arms. The power comes from your hips, like this.
The old wives' tale that fish is brain food is old wisdom, and although it holds true that fish meat does contain vitamin B, which promotes healthy brain growth and development, it is more placebo than it really is all that vitamin B. On the coast of Japan during the late 1600s, fishermen were going through a decline. The sale of fish had dropped significantly, and fishermen were suffering because of the lack of sales. All of a sudden, there was a resurgence of sales in fish as the local fishermen claimed to have caught a new species of fish in a previously unexplored region. They started selling their newly found species as quote-unquote brain food. Because of this, a massive interest was sparked in the public of Japan. Eventually, this claim was slowly forgotten, until just before World War I, when many Japanese started immigrating to Canada. Many of these immigrants worked as fishermen on the West Coast. To beat the competition of the other fishermen in the same region, they started up the same claim. Word spread, and thus the old wives' tale. Our species psychologically have a tendency to believe before we analyze. Our brain is wired to store information when given to us and then later process the facts given. But because of the lethargic tendencies of our species, we tend to not give this information a second glance once it's stored in the brain, at least until later given reason to be questioned. Even when given reasonable evidence that would clearly disprove the information we hold on to, humans also find it difficult to admit defeat. In one's mind, it's harder to admit defeat than it is to simply comply with the true factual information once it combats with your previous ideologies. In fact, all of the factual information I said previously in this video was false. Don't believe me? Just look it up on the internet.